Welcome aboard the Buccaneers podcast. My name is Berryessa. Thank you so much for joining us for episode 3 of Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson, read by yours truly. If you're just now joining us, click the link above for the previous episodes. Otherwise, enjoy.
Damn your eyes, heave-ho!
15 men on a dead man's chest.
Yo-ho-ho, and a bottle of rum.
Drink and the devil had done for the rest.
Yo-ho-ho, and a bottle of rum.
Chapter 8, At the Sign of the Spyglass. When I had done breakfasting, the squire gave me a note addressed to John Silver at the Sign of the Spyglass, and told me I should easily find the place by following the line of the docks and keeping a bright lookout for a little tavern with a large brass telescope for a sign. I set off, overjoyed at this opportunity to see more of the ships and seamen, and picked my way among a great crowd of people and carts and bales, for the dock was now at its busiest, until I found the tavern in question. It was a bright enough little place of entertainment. The sign was newly painted, the windows had neat red curtains, the floor was cleanly sanded, there was a street on either side and an open door on both, which made the large, low room pretty clear to see in spite of clouds of tobacco smoke. The customers were mostly seafaring men, and they talked so loudly that I hung at the door almost afraid to enter. As I was waiting, a man came out of the side room, and, at a glance, I was sure he must be Long John. His left leg was cut off close by the hip, and under the left shoulder he carried a crutch, which he managed with wonderful dexterity, hopping about upon it like a bird. He was very tall and strong, with a face as big as a ham, plain and pale, but intelligent and smiling. Indeed, he seemed in the most cheerful spirits, whistling as he moved about among the tables, with a merry word or a slap on the shoulder for the more favored of his guests. Now, to tell you the truth, from the very first mention of Long John in Squire Trelawney's letter, I had taken a fear in my mind that he might prove to be the very one-legged sailor whom I had watched for so long at the old Benbow, but one look at the man before me was enough. I had seen the captain, and Black Dog, and the blind man Pew, and I thought I knew what a buccaneer was like. A very different creature, according to me, from this clean and pleasant-tempered landlord. I plucked up courage at once, crossed the threshold, and walked right up to the man where he stood, propped on his crutch, talking to a customer. "Mr. Silver, sir?" I asked, holding out the note.
"Yes, my lad," said he, "such is my name, to be sure. And who may you be?"
And then he saw the squire's letter. He seemed to me to give something almost like a start.
"Oh," said he, quite loud and offering his hand, "I see you are our new cabin boy. Pleased I am to see you."
And then he took my hand in his large, firm grasp. Just then, one of the customers at the far side rose suddenly and made for the door. It was close by him, and he was out in the street in a moment. But his hurry had attracted my notice, and I recognized him at a glance. It was the tallow-faced man wanting 2 fingers who had come first to the Admiral Benbow.
"Oh!" I cried, "stop him! It's Black Dog!" "I don't care 2 coppers who he is," cried Silver, "but he hasn't paid his score. Harry, run and catch him."
One of the others who was nearest the door leapt up and started in pursuit.
"If he were Admiral Hawke, he shall pay his score,"
cried Silver, and then, relinquishing my hand, "Who did you say he was?" he asked.
"Black what?"
"Dog, sir," said I. "Has Mr. Trelawney not told you of the buccaneers? He was one of them."
"So," cried Silver. "In my house? Ben, run and help Harry. One of those swabs, was he? Was that you drinking with him, Morgan? Step up here."
The man whom he called Morgan, an old, gray-haired, mahogany-faced sailor, came forward pretty sheepishly, rolling his quid.
"Now, Morgan," said Long John very sternly, "you never clapped your eyes on that black dog before, did you now?"
"Not I, sir," said Morgan with a salute.
"You don't know his name, do you?"
"No, sir."
"By the powers, Tom Morgan, it's good for you," exclaimed the landlord. "If you had mixed up with the like of that, you would never have put another foot in my house, you may lay to that. And what was he saying to you?" I don't rightly know, sir, answered Morgan. Do you call that a head on your shoulders or a blessed dead-eye? Cried Long John. Don't rightly know, don't you? Perhaps you don't happen to rightly know who you was speaking to, perhaps. Come now, what was ye jawing? Voyages, captains, ships, pipe up, what was it? We was talking a keel hauling, answered Morgan. Keel hauling, was ye? And a mighty suitable thing, too, and you may lay to that. Get back to your place for a lubber, Tom. And then, as Morgan rolled back to his seat, Silver added to me in a confidential whisper that was very flattering, as I thought, He's an honest man, Tom Morgan, only stupid. And now, he ran on again aloud, let's see, Black Dog. No, I don't know the name, not I. Yet I think I've seen the swab. He used to come here with a blind beggar, he used.
That he did, you may be sure, said I. I knew that blind man, too. His name was Pew.
It was, cried Silver, now quite excited. Pew! That were his name for certain. Ah, he looked a shark, he did. If we run down this Black Dog now, there'll be news for Captain Trelawney. Ben's a good runner. Few seamen run better than Ben. He should run him down hand over hand by the powers. He talked of keel-hauling, did he? I'll keel-haul him. All the time he was jerking out these phrases, he was stumping up and down the tavern on his crutch, slapping tables with his hand, and giving such a show of excitement as would have convinced an Old Bailey judge or a Bow Street runner. My suspicions had been thoroughly reawakened on finding Black Dog at the Spyglass, and I watched the cook narrowly. But he was too deep, and too ready and too clever for me, and by the time the two men had come back out of breath and confessed that they had lost the track in the crowd and had been scolded like thieves, I would have gone bail for the innocence of Long John Silver. See here now, Hawkins, said he. Here's a blessed hard thing on a man like me, now ain't it? There's Captain Trelawney. What's he to think? Here I have this confounded son of a Dutchman sitting in my own house, drinking of my own rum. Here you comes and tells me of it plain, and here I let him give us all the slip before my blessed deadlights. Now, Hawkins, you do me justice with the captain. You're a lad, you are, but you're smart as paint. I seen that when you first come in. Now, here it is. What could I do with this old timber I hobble on? When I was an A.B. master mariner, I'd have come up alongside of him hand over hand and broached him to in a brace of old shakes, I would. But now... And then all of a sudden he stopped, and his jaw dropped as though he had remembered something. The score! He burst out. 3 goes a rum! Why, shiver my timbers if I hadn't forgotten my score! And falling on a bench, he laughed until the tears ran down his cheeks. I could not help joining, and we laughed together, peal after peal, until the tavern rang again. Why, what a precious old sea-calf I am, he said at last, wiping his cheeks. You and me should get on well, Hawkins, for I'll take my davy I should be rated ship's boy. But come now, stand by to go about, this won't do. Duty is duty, messmates. I'll put on my old cocked hat and step along o' you to Captain Trelawney's and report this here affair. For mind you, it's serious, young Hawkins, and neither you nor me's come out of it with what I would make so bold as to call credit. Nor you neither, says you. Not smart, none of the pair of us smart. But dash my buttons, that was a good 'un about my score. And he began to laugh again, and that so heartily that though I did not see the joke as he did, I was again obliged to join him in his mirth. On our little walk along the quays he made himself the most interesting companion, telling me about the different ships that we passed by, their rig, tonnage, and nationality, explaining the work that was going forward, how one was discharging, another taking in cargo, and a third making ready for sea, and every now and then telling me some little anecdote of ships or seamen, or repeating a nautical phrase till I had learned it perfectly. I began to see that here was one of the best possible shipmates. When we got to the inn, the squire and Dr. Livesey were seated together, finishing a quart of ale with toast in it, before they should go aboard the schooner on a visit of inspection. Long John told the story from first to last with a great deal of spirit and the most perfect truth. That was how it were now, weren't it, Hawkins? He would say now and again, and I could always bear him entirely out. The two gentlemen regretted that Black Dog had got away,
But we all agreed there was nothing to be done, and after he had been complimented, Long John took up his crutch and departed.
"All hands aboard by 4 this afternoon," shouted the squire after him. "Aye, aye, sir," cried the cook in his passage.
"Well, squire," said Dr. Livesey, "I don't put much faith in your discoveries as a general thing, but I will say this. John Silver suits me."
"The man's a perfect trump,"
declared the squire. "And now," added the doctor, "Jim may come on board with us, may he not?"
"Oh, to be sure he may," said Squire. "Take your hat, Hawkins, and we'll see the ship."
Chapter 9. Powder and Arms. The Hispaniola lay some way out, and we went under the figureheads and round the sterns of many other ships, and their cables sometimes grated underneath our keel, and sometimes swung above us. At last, however, we got alongside, and were met and saluted as we stepped aboard by the mate, Mr. Arrow, a brown old sailor with earrings in his ear and a squint. He and the squire were very thick and friendly, but I soon observed that things were not the same between Mr. Trelawney and the captain. This last was a sharp-looking man who seemed angry with everything on board, and was soon to tell us why, for he had hardly got down into the cabin when a sailor followed us.
"Captain Smollett, sir, axing to speak with you," said he. "I am always at the captain's orders. Show him in," said the squire.
The captain, who was close behind his messenger, entered at once, and shut the door behind him.
"Well, Captain Smollett, what have you to say? All well, I hope, all shipshape and seaworthy?"
"Well, sir," said the captain, "better speak plain, I believe, even at the risk of offense. I don't like this cruise, I don't like the men, and I don't like my officer. That's short and sweet."
"Perhaps, sir, you don't like the ship?"
inquired the squire, very angry as I could see. "I can't speak to that, sir, not having seen her tried," said the captain. "She seems a clever craft, more I can't say."
"Possibly, sir, you may not like your employer either,"
said the squire. But here Dr. Livesey cut in. "Stay a bit," said he, "stay a bit. No use of such questions as that but to produce ill feeling. The captain has said too much, or he has said too little, and I'm bound to say that I require an explanation of his words. You don't, you say, like the cruise. Now why?" "I was engaged, sir, on what we call sealed orders, to sail this ship for that gentleman where he should bid me," said the captain. "So far, so good. But now I find that every man before the mast knows more than I do. I don't call that fair, now do you?" "No," said Dr. Livesey, "I don't." "Next," said the captain, "I learn we are going after treasure. Hear it from my own hands, mind you. Now treasure is a ticklish word. I don't like treasure voyages on any account, and I don't like them, above all, when they are secret, and when, begging your pardon, Mr. Trelawney, the secret has been told to the parrot."
"Silver's parrot?"
asked the squire. "It's a way of speaking," said the captain. "Blabbed, I mean. It's my belief neither of you gentlemen know what you are about, and I'll tell you my way of it. Life or death, and a close run." "That is all clear, and, I dare say, true enough," replied Dr. Livesey. "We take the risk, but we are not so ignorant as you believe us. Next, you say you don't like the crew. Are they not good seamen?" "I don't like them, sir," returned Captain Smollett, "and I think I should have had the choosing of my own hands, if you go to that." "Perhaps you should," replied the doctor. "My friend should, perhaps, have taken you along with him, but the slight, if there was one, was unintentional. And you don't like Mr. Arrow?" "I don't, sir. I believe he's a good seaman, but he's too free with the crew to be a good officer. A mate should keep himself to himself, shouldn't drink with the men before the mast."
"Do you mean he drinks?"
cried the squire. "No, sir," replied the captain, "only that he's too familiar." "Well, now, and the short and long of it, captain," asked the doctor. "Tell us what you want." "Well, gentlemen, are you determined to go on this cruise?"
"Like iron,"
answered the squire. "Very good," said the captain. "Then, as you've heard me very patiently saying things that I could not prove, hear me a few words more. They are putting the powder and the arms in the forehold. Now, you have a good place under the cabin, why not put them there? First point. Then, you are bringing 4 of your own people with you, and they tell me some of them are to be berthed forward. Why not give them the berths here beside the cabin? Second point."
"Any more?"
asked Mr. Trelawney. "One more," said the captain. "There's been too much blabbing already." "Far too much," agreed the doctor. "I'll tell you what I've heard myself," continued Captain Smollett, "that you have a map of an island, that there's crosses on the map to show where treasure is, and that the island lies—" and then he named the latitude and longitude exactly.
"I've never told that," cried the squire. "'Twas so."
"The hands know it, sir," returned the captain.
"Livesey, that must have been you or Hawkins," cried the squire.
"It doesn't much matter who it was," replied the doctor, and I could see that neither he nor the captain paid much regard to Mr. Trelawney's protestations. Neither did I, to be sure. He was so loose a talker. Yet in this case I believe he was really right, and that nobody had told the situation of the island. "Well, gentlemen," continued the captain, "I don't know who has this map, but I make it a point. It shall be kept secret even from me and Mr. Arrow. Otherwise I would ask you to let me resign." "I see," said the doctor. "You wish us to keep this matter dark, and to make a garrison of the stern part of the ship, manned with my friend's own people, and provided with all the arms and powder on board. In other words, you fear a mutiny." "Sir," said Captain Smollett, "with no intention to take offense, I deny your right to put words in my mouth. No captain, sir, would be justified in going to sea at all if he had ground enough to say that. As for Mr. Arrow, I believe him thoroughly honest. Some of the men are the same, all may be for what I know, but I am responsible for the ship's safety, and the life of every man jack aboard her. I see things going, as I think, not quite right, and I ask you to take certain precautions or let me resign my berth, and that's all." "Captain Smollett," began the doctor with a smile, "did ever you hear the fable of the mountain and the mouse? You'll excuse me, I dare say, but you remind me of that fable. When you came in here, I'll stake my wig you meant more than this." "Doctor," said the captain, "you are smart. When I came in here, I meant to get discharged. I had no thought that Mr. Trelawney would hear a word."
"No more I would," cried the squire. "Had Livesey not been here, I should have seen you to the deuce. As it is, I have heard you. I will do as you desire, but I think the worse of you."
"That's as you please, sir," said the captain. "You'll find I do my duty." And with that he took his leave. "Trelawney," said the doctor, "contrary to all my notions, I believe you have managed to get 2 honest men on board with you. That man and John Silver."
"Silver, if you like," cried the squire. "But as for that intolerable humbug, I declare I think his conduct unmanly, unsailorly, and downright un-English."
"Well," says the doctor, "we shall see." When we came on deck, the men had begun already to take out the arms and powder, yo-hoing at their work, while the captain and Mr. Arrow stood by superintending. The new arrangement was quite to my liking. The whole schooner had been overhauled. 6 berths had been made astern out of what had been the after part of the main hold, and this set of cabins was only joined to the galley in the forecastle by a sparred passage on the port side. It had been originally meant that the captain, Mr. Arrow, Hunter, Joyce, the doctor, and the squire were to occupy these 6 berths. Now Redruth and I were to get 2 of them, and Mr. Arrow and the captain were to sleep on deck in the companion, which had been enlarged on each side till you might almost have called it a roundhouse. Very low it was still, of course, but there was room to swing 2 hammocks, and even the mate seemed pleased with the arrangement. Even he, perhaps, had been doubtful as to the crew, but that is only guess, for as you shall hear, we had not long the benefit of his opinion. We were all hard at work, changing the powder in the berths, when the last man or 2, and Long John along with them, came off in the shore boat. The cook came up the side like a monkey for cleverness, and, as soon as he saw what was doing,
"So ho, mates," says he, "what's this?"
"We're a-changing of the powder, Jack," answers one.
"Why, by the powers,"
cried Long John,
"if we do, we'll miss the morning tide."
"My orders," said the captain shortly. "You may go below, my man. Hands will want supper."
"Aye, aye, sir,"
answered the cook, and, touching his forelock, he disappeared at once in the direction of his galley. "That's a good man, Captain," said the doctor. "Very likely, sir," replied Captain Smollett.
"Easy with that, men, easy,"
he ran on to the fellows who were shifting the powder, and then suddenly observing me examining the swivel we carried amidships, a long brass 9.
"Here, you ship's boy," he cried, "out of that! Off with you to the cook and get some work."
And then, as I was hurrying off, I heard him say quite loudly to the doctor,
"I'll have no favorites on my ship."
I assure you, I was quite of the squire's way of thinking, and hated the captain deeply. Chapter 10. The Voyage. All that night we were in a great bustle, getting things stowed in their place, and boatfuls of the squire's friends, Mr. Blandley and the like, coming off to wish him a good voyage and a safe return. We never had a night at the Admiral Benbow when I had half the work, and I was dog-tired when, a little before dawn, the boatswain sounded his pipe, and the crew began to man the capstan bars. I might have been twice as weary, yet I would not have left the deck. All was so new and interesting to me, the brief commands, the shrill note of the whistle, the men bustling to their places in the glimmer of the ship's lanterns. "Now, Barbecue, tip us a stave!" cried one voice. "The old one!" cried another. "Aye, aye, mates," said Long John, who was standing by with his crutch under his arm, and at once broke out into the air in words I knew so well. 15 men on a dead man's chest. And then the whole crew bore chorus. Yo ho ho, and a bottle of rum. And at the third ho, drove the bars before them with a will. Even at that exciting moment it carried me back to the old Admiral Benbow in a second, and I seemed to hear the voice of the captain piping in the chorus. But soon the anchor was short up, soon it was hanging, dripping at the bows. Soon the sails began to draw, and the land and shipping to flit by on either side, and before I could lie down to snatch an hour of slumber, the Hispaniola had begun her voyage to the Isle of Treasure. I am not going to relate that voyage in detail. It was fairly prosperous. The ship proved to be a good ship, and the crew were capable seamen, and the captain thoroughly understood his business. But before we came the length of Treasure Island, 2 or 3 things had happened which require to be known. Mr. Arrow, first of all, turned out even worse than the captain had feared. He had no command among the men, and people did what they pleased with him. But that was by no means the worst of it, for after a day or 2 at sea he began to appear on deck with hazy eye, red cheeks, stuttering tongue, and other marks of drunkenness. Time after time he was ordered below in disgrace. Sometimes he fell and cut himself. Sometimes he lay all day long in his little bunk at one side of the companion. Sometimes for a day or 2 he would be almost sober and attend to his work at least passably. In the meantime we could never make out where he got the drink. That was the ship's mystery. Watch him as we pleased, we could do nothing to solve it. And when we asked him to his face, he would only laugh, if he were drunk and if he were sober, deny solemnly that he had ever tasted anything but water. He was not only useless as an officer and a bad influence among the men, but it was plain that at this rate he must soon kill himself outright. So nobody was much surprised nor very sorry when one dark night with a head sea he disappeared entirely and was seen no more. "Overboard," said the captain. "Well, gentlemen, that saves the trouble of putting him in irons." But there we were, without a mate, and it was necessary, of course, to advance one of the men. The boatswain, Job Anderson, was the likeliest man aboard, and though he kept his old title, he served in a way as mate. Mr. Trelawney had followed the sea, and his knowledge made him very useful, for he often took a watch himself in easy weather, and the coxswain, Israel Hands, was a careful, wily old experienced seaman, who could be trusted at a pinch with almost anything. He was a great confidant of Long John Silver, and so the mention of his name leads me on to speak of our ship's cook, Barbecue, as the men called him. Aboard ship, he carried his crutch by a lanyard around his neck to have both hands as free as possible. It was something to see him wedge the foot of the crutch against a bulkhead and, propped against it, yielding to every movement of the ship, get on with his cooking like someone safe ashore. Still more strange was it to see him in the heaviest of weather cross the deck. He had a line or 2 rigged up to help him across the widest spaces. Long John's earrings, they were called, and he would hand himself from one place to another, now using the crutch, now trailing it alongside by the lanyard, as quickly as another man could walk. Yet some of the men who had sailed with him before expressed their pity to see him so reduced. "He's no common man, Barbecue," said the coxswain to me. "He had good schooling in his young days, and can speak like a book when so minded. And brave. A lion's nothing alongside of Long John. I seen him grapple 4 and knock their heads together, him unarmed." All the crew respected and even obeyed him. He had a way of talking to each and doing everybody some particular service. To me, he was unweariedly kind, and always glad to see me in the galley, which he kept as clean as a new pin, the dishes hanging up, burnished, and his parrot in a cage in one corner. "Come away, Hawkins," he would say. "Come and have a yarn with John. Nobody more welcome than yourself, my son.
Sit you down and hear the news. Here's Captain Flint. I calls my parrot Captain Flint after the famous buccaneer. Here's Captain Flint predicting success to our voyage. Wasn't you, Captain? And the parrot would say with great rapidity, pieces of 8, pieces of 8, pieces of 8, till you wondered that it was not out of breath, or till John threw his handkerchief over the cage. Now that bird, he would say, is maybe 200 years old, Hawkins. They live forever mostly, and if anybody's seen more wickedness, it must be the devil himself. She's sailed with England, the great Captain England, the pirate. She's been at Madagascar, and at Malabar, and Suriname, and Providence, and Portobello. She was at the fishing up of the wrecked plate ships. It's there she learned pieces of 8, and little wonder. 350,000 of 'em, Hawkins. She was at the boarding of the Viceroy of the Indies out of Goa, she was. And to look at her you would think she was a babby. But you smelt powder, didn't you, Captain? Stand by to go about, the parrot would scream. Ah, she's a handsome craft, she is, the cook would say, and give her sugar out of his pocket. And then the bird would peck at the bars and swear straight on, passing belief for wickedness. There, John would add, it can't touch pitch and not be mucked, lad. Here's this poor old innocent bird o' mine swearing blue fire, and none the wiser, you may lay to that. She would swear the same in a manner of speaking before chaplain. And John would touch his forelock in a solemn way he had that made me think he was the best of men. In the meantime, Squire and Captain Smollett were still on pretty distant terms with one another. The squire made no bones about the matter. He despised the captain. The captain, on his part, never spoke but when spoken to, and then sharp and short and dry, and not a word wasted. He owned, when driven into a corner, that he seemed to have been wrong about the crew, that some of them were as brisk as he wanted to see, and all had behaved fairly well. As for the ship, he had taken a downright fancy to her. She'll lie a point nearer the wind than a man has a right to expect of his own married wife, sir. But, he would add, all I say is we're not home yet, and I don't like the cruise. The squire at this would turn away and march up and down the deck, chin in air. A trifle more of that, man, he would say, and I should explode. We had some heavy weather, which only proved the qualities of the Hispaniola. Every man on board seemed well content, and they must have been hard to please if they had been otherwise, for it is my belief there was never a ship's company so spoiled since Noah put to sea. Double grog was going on the least excuse. There was duff on odd days, as for instance if the squire heard it was any man's birthday, and always a barrel of apples standing broached in the waist for anyone to help himself that had a fancy. Never knew good come of it yet, the captain said to Dr. Livesey. Spoil forecastle hands, make devils, that's my belief. But good did come of the apple barrel, as you shall hear, for if it had not been for that, we should have had no note of warning, and might all have perished by the hand of treachery. This was how it came about. We had run up the trades to get the wind of the island we were after. I am not allowed to be more plain. And now we were running down for it with a bright lookout day and night. It was about the last day of our outward voyage, by the largest computation. Some time that night, or at latest before noon the morrow, we should sight the treasure island. We were heading south-southwest, and had a steady breeze abeam and a quiet sea. The Hispaniola rolled steadily, dipping her bowsprit now and then with a whiff of spray. All was drawing low and aloft. Everyone was in the bravest spirits, because we were now so near an end of the first part of our adventure. Now, just after sundown, when all my work was over, and I was on my way to my berth, it occurred to me that I should like an apple. I ran on deck. The watch was all forward, looking out for the island. The man at the helm was watching the luff of the sail, and whistling away gently to himself, and that was the only sound, excepting the swish of the sea against the bows and around the sides of the ship. In I got bodily into the apple barrel, and found there was scarce an apple left. But, sitting down there in the dark, what with the sound of the waters and the rocking movement of the ship, I had either fallen asleep, or was on the point of doing so, when a heavy man sat down with rather a clash close by. The barrel shook as he leaned his shoulders against it, and I was just about to jump up when the man began to speak. It was Silver's voice, and before I had heard a dozen words I would not have shown myself for all the world, but lay there, trembling and listening in the extreme of fear and curiosity, for from those dozen words I understood
that the lives of all the honest men aboard depended upon me alone. Chapter 11. What I Heard in the Apple Barrel.
No, not I, said Silva. Flint was captain. I was quartermaster along of my timber leg. The same broadside I lost my leg, old Pew lost his dead lights. It was a master surgeon, him that amputated me, out of college and all, Latin by the bucket and what not. But he was hanged like a dog and sun-dried like the rest at Corso Castle. That was Robert's men, that was, and comed of changing names to their ships, Royal Fortune and so on. Now, what a ship was christened, so let her say I says. So it was with the Cassandra, as brought us all safe home from Malabar after England took the Viceroy of the Indies. So it was with the old Walrus, Flint's old ship, as I've seen a muck with the red blood and fit to sink with gold.
Ah, cried another voice, that of the youngest hand on board, and evidently full of admiration. He was the flower of the flock, was Flint.
Davis was a man, too, by all accounts, said Silva. I never sailed along of him, first with England, then with Flint. That's my story. And now here on my own account, in a manner of speaking, I laid by 900 safe from England and 2,000 after Flint. That ain't bad for a man before the mast all safe in the bank. 'Tain't earning now, it's saving, does it, you may lay to that. Where's all England's men now? I don't know. Where's Flint's? Why, most of 'em aboard here, and glad to get the duff. Been begging before that, some on 'em. Old Pew lost his sight and might have thought shame spends £1,200 in a year like a lord in Parliament. Where is he now? Well, he's dead now and under hatches. But for 2 years before that, shiver my timbers, the man was starving. He begged and he stole and he cut throats and starved by the powers.
Well, it ain't much use after all, said the young seaman.
'Tain't much use for fools, you may lay to that. That nor nothing, cried Silver. But now, you look here. You're young, you are, but you're smart as paint. I seen that when I set my eyes on you, and I'll talk to you like a man.
You may imagine how I felt when I heard this abominable old rogue addressing another in the very same words of flattery he had used to myself. I think, if I had been able, that I would have killed him through the barrel. Meantime he ran on, little supposing he was overheard.
Here it is about gentlemen of fortune. They lives rough, and they risks swinging, but they eat and drink like fighting cocks, and when a cruise is done, why, it's hundreds of pounds instead of hundreds of farthings in their pockets. Now, the most goes for rum and a good fling, and to sea again in their shirts, but that's not the course I lay. I puts it all away, some here, some there, and none too much anywheres for reason of suspicion. I'm 50, mark you. Once back from this cruise I set up gentlemen in earnest. Time enough too, says you. But I've lived easy in the meantime. Never denied myself a nothing heart desires, and slept soft and ate dainty all my days but when at sea. And how did I begin? Before the mast, like you.
Well, said the other, but all the money's gone now, ain't it? You daren't show face in Bristol after this.
Why, where might you suppose it was? Asked Silva derisively.
At Bristol and banks and places, answered his companion.
If it were, said the cook, it were when we weighed anchor. But my old missus has it all by now, and the Spyglass is sold, lease and goodwill and rigging, and the old girl's off to meet me. I would tell you where, for I trust you, but it'd make jealousy among the mates.
And can you trust your missus? Asked the other.
Gentlemen of fortune, returned the cook, usually trust little among themselves, and right they are. You may lay to it. But I have a way with me, I have. When a mate brings a slip on his cable, one as knows me, I mean, it won't be in the same world with old John. There was some that was feared of Pew, and some that was feared of Flint. But Flint his own self was afeard of me. Feared he was, and proud. They was the roughest crew afloat, was Flint's. The devil himself would have been feared to go to sea with them. Well now, I tell you, I'm not a boasting man, and you seen yourself how easy I keep company. But when I was quartermaster, Lambs wasn't the word for Flint's old buccaneers. You may be sure yourself an old John Ship.
Well, I tell you now, replied the lad, I didn't half a quarter like the job till I had this talk with you, John, but there's my hand on it now.
And a brave lad you were, and smart too, answered Silver, shaking hands so heartily that all the barrel shook. And a finer figurehead for a gentleman of fortune I never clapped my eyes on.
By this time I had begun to understand the meaning of their terms. By a gentleman of fortune they plainly meant neither more nor less than a common pirate, and the little scene that I had overheard was the last act in the corruption of one of the honest hands, perhaps of the last one left aboard. But on this point I was soon to be relieved, for Silver giving a little whistle, a third man strolled up and sat down by the party.
"Dick Square," said Silver. "Oh, I knew Dick was square," returned the voice of the coxswain Israel Hands. "He's no fool, is Dick."
And he turned his quid and spat.
"But look here," he went on, "here's what I want to know, Barbecue. How long are we a-going to stand off and on like a blessed bumboat? I've had a most enough of Captain Smollett. He's hazed me long enough, by thunder. I want to go into that cabin, I do. I want their pickles and wines and that."
"Israel," said Silver, "your head ain't much account, nor ever was. But you're able to hear, I reckon. Leastways, your ears is big enough. Now here's what I say. You'll berth forward, and you'll live hard, and you'll speak soft, and you'll keep sober, till I give the word. And you may lay to that, my son."
"Well, I don't say no, do I?"
growled the coxswain.
"What I say is, when? That's what I say."
"When? By the powers!" cried Silver. "Well, now, if you want to know, I'll tell you when. The last moment I can manage, and that's when. Here's a first-rate seaman, Captain Smollett, sails the blessed ship for us. Here's the squire and doctor with a map and such. I don't know where it is, do I? No more do you, says you. Well, then, I mean this squire and doctor shall find the stuff and help us get it aboard, by the powers. Then we'll see. If I was sure of all you sons of double Dutchmen, I'd have Captain Smollett navigate us halfway back again before I struck." "Why, we're all seamen aboard here, I should think," said the lad Dick. "We're all forecastle hands, you mean," snapped Silver. "We can steer a course, but who's to set one? That's what all you gentlemen spit on, first and last. If I had my way, I'd have Captain Smollett work us back into the trades at least. Then we'd have no blessed miscalculations and a spoonful of water a day. But I know the sort you are. I'll finish with 'em at the island as soon as the blunt's on board, and a pity it is. But you're never happy till you're drunk. Split my sides, I've a sick heart to sail with the likes of you."
"Easy all, little John," cried Israel. "Who's a-crossing of you?"
"Why, how many tall ships, think ye now, have I seen laid aboard? And how many brisk lads drying in the sun at Execution Dock?" cried Silver. "And all for this same hurry and hurry and hurry. You hear me? I have seen a thing or two at sea, I have. If you would only lay your course and point to windward, you would ride in carriages, you would. But not you. I know you. You'll have your mouthful of rum tomorrow and go hang."
"Everybody knowed you was a kind of chapling, John.
But there's others as could hand and steer as well as you," said Israel. "They liked a bit of fun, they did. They wasn't so high and dry, nohow, but took their fling like jolly companions, every one." "So?" said Silver. "Well, and where are they now? Pugh was that sort, and he died a beggar man. Flint was, and he died of rum at Savannah. They was a sweet crew, they was, only where are they?" "But," asked Dick, "when we do lay 'em athwart, what are we to do with 'em anyhow?" "There's the man for me," cried the cook admiringly. "That's what I call business. Well, what would you think? Put 'em ashore like maroons? That would have been England's way. Or cut 'em down like that much pork? That would have been Flint's or Billy Bones."
"Billy was the man for that," said Israel. "Dead men don't bite, says he. Well, he's dead now hisself. He knows the long and short on it now, and if ever a rough hand come to port, it was Billy."
"Right you are," said Silver. "Rough and ready. But mark you here, I'm an easy man. I'm quite the gentleman, says you. But this time it's serious. Duty is duty, mates. I give my vote.
death. When I am in Parliament and riding in my coach, I don't want none of these sea lawyers in a cabin a coming home unlooked for like the devil at prayers. Wait is what I say, but when the time comes, why, let her rip. John, cries the coxswain, you're a man. You'll say so, Israel, when you see, said Silver. Only one thing I claim. I claim Trelawney. I'll wring his calf's head off his body with these hands. Dick, he added, breaking off, you just jump up like a sweet lad and get me an apple to wet my pipe like.
You may fancy the terror I was in. I should have leapt out and run for it if I had found the strength, but my limbs and heart alike misgave me. I heard Dick began to rise, and then someone seemingly stopped him, and the voice of Hans exclaimed,
Oh, stow that. Don't you get sucking of that bilge, John. Let's have a go of the rum. Dick, said Silver, I trust you. I've a gauge on the keg, mind. There's the key. You fill the pannikin and bring it up.
Terrified as I was, I could not help thinking to myself that this must have been how Mr. Arrow got the strong waters that destroyed him. Dick was gone but a little while, and during his absence Israel spoke straight on in the cook's ear. It was but a word or two that I could catch, and yet I gathered some important news, for besides other scraps that tended to the same purpose, this whole clause was audible.
Not another man of them'll join.
Hence there were still faithful men on board. When Dick returned, one after another of the trio took the pannikin and drank. One,
To luck.
another with a here's to old Flint, and Silver himself saying in a kind of song,
Here's to ourselves, and hold your luff, plenty of prizes and plenty of duff.
Just then a sort of brightness fell upon me in the barrel, and looking up, I found the moon had risen, and was silvering the mizzen top and shining white on the luff of the foresail, and almost at the same time the voice of the lookout shouted, Land ho! Thanks again for joining us. If you liked what you heard, please hit the buttons below, give us a like and a subscribe, and hit that bell icon so you get notified whenever we drop a new video. You can follow the links to find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Please share us with your friends and family, and join us next time for the next episode of the Buccaneers podcast.